distinguished Mayor and Chairperson of the District Council, Chief Executives, Miss Fleur Vallée, Project Officer of the Agence Française de Développement, Mr. Paul Hayden of Taxel Limited, United Kingdom. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm indeed very pleased to be present here this morning for the opening of this workshop, which is being organized by the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Center in connection with the project assessment of the capacity building needs of first response disaster management agencies. As you might be aware, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Center has been embarking on a number of projects and initiatives, acting under the strong and dynamic leadership of our Minister of Environment, Sustainable Development, Beach and Disaster Management, to enhance our national disaster preparedness and response capabilities. One among these is the actual project on assessment of the capacity building needs of first response disaster management agencies. This project is funded through a grant in aid from the Agence Française de Développement, to whom we are extremely grateful. The consultancy services of Mr. Paul Hayden of Taxel Limited, United Kingdom, have been retained for this purpose. The latter has been involved in disaster and risk management for more than 36 years and has particular experience in disaster operations, training and education, as well as in national policy formulation. He has also been a national strategic advisor to the United Kingdom government for disaster operations and is presently a non-executive director of the United Kingdom National Environment Research Council. His consultancy firm is working with government, World Bank, the United Nations, and private sector clients on a range of disaster risk management and training projects. Recent project includes project for UNDP in Mongolia, Bhutan, and Mauritius, the World Bank training in USA and Ethiopia, and the private sector roles and government project in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, this project aims to identify the capacity building needs of first response disaster management agencies, identifying linkages and overlaps with the goal of clarifying roles and responsibilities in order to be better trained and equipped to face existing and future challenges of disasters, be it man-made or natural. The key first response agencies identified include the Special Mobile Force, the Special Support Unit, the National Coast Guard, and the Helicopter Squadron of the Mauritius Police Force, the Mauritius Fire and Rescue Services, the SAMU, the National Red Cross Society, the local authorities, namely the municipalities and district council, and members of the National Emergency Operation Command. The project also includes first response agencies for Rodrigue as well as our outer islands. The outcome of this project will be achieved through the following outputs. Firstly, response agencies' mandate in disaster situations and crises will be assessed and, where necessary, realigned to ensure unity of purpose between disparate agencies. Secondly, first worst credible scenarios will be developed to support uniform assessment of capacity and existing gaps within first response system. Thirdly, comprehensive and uniform assessment of first response agency capacity will be carried out, including clear identification of gaps and overlaps. Fourthly, first response agency protocols for disasters that meet the requirements of all stakeholders will be updated to reinforce and support comprehensive, coordinated response and agreed with key stakeholders. Fifth, to identify gaps and propose remedial actions, including capacity building plan to ensure the operational capacity is sufficient for response in all sectors. And last but not least, a comprehensive and integrated action plan to build capacity of first response agencies will be produced in a participatory manner with all concerned stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, the NDRMC has been set up to act as the focal institution for the state of Mauritius for the planning, organizing, coordinating, and monitoring of disaster risk reduction and management activities at all levels. Within this mandate, the NDRMC has been endeavoring hard to set up a robust system of disaster management and response. From a traditionally highly centralized national response system, we have evolved into a more decentralized one with the setting up of the local disaster risk reduction and management committees and the local emergency operation command, the LEOC, at municipalities and district council level. This is very much in line with the Sendai framework, which was adopted by the United Nations during the World Summit on Disaster Risk Reduction held in March 2015 at Sendai in Japan. A decentralized system of disaster management offers the benefits of faster response and a more effective command, control, and coordination system. Ladies and gentlemen, local authorities are best suited to provide first-hand knowledge and understanding of social, economic, infrastructure, and environmental issues within their respective communities, and as such are ideally placed to support the communities from a disaster management perspective. The local authorities can operate more effectively with the local communities and national institutions as they are constantly working with them in various other areas. As such, they are directly and explicitly linked to their communities. Though there's still ground to make, laudable progress has been achieved on this score. The activation of the LEOC at time of disasters and during simulation exercises are vivid example of the progress achieved. I wish to thank the mayors and district council, chairperson, the chief executive, the local coordinators and staff for the interest and painstaking efforts they have put in to constantly improve the system. Yet, as this is a somewhat new area of responsibility, there are still gaps. And one of the outputs of this project is in actual fact to identify the gaps in terms of human and material resources, training, communication system, etc. at local level and see how best this can be addressed. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I wish to express my heartfelt gratitude to His Lordship, the Lord Mayor of the Municipal Council of the City of Port Louis, for all the help and assistance extended to us to make this workshop a success. I wish you all a fruitful deliberation. Thank you for your kind attention.
The City Council, together with the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Center, had the pleasure to welcome you for the capacity building for disaster managers of local emergency operation command. As for the new disaster risk reduction management structure put in place, municipal and district councils have to set up a local disaster risk reduction and management committee headed by the mayor of the municipal town council or the chairman of the district council. The committee is the main coordinating agency for all the disaster risk reduction and management of the activities within their respective jurisdiction. The event of a crisis, disaster, the local emergency operation command, LEOC, is activated in the local authority to coordinate and monitor all response within the council area. The chairperson of the LEOC is assisted by a divisional commander and other important stakeholders during disaster response activities. Recently, I had the opportunity to participate at the COP21 summit for the climate change in Paris for local leaders under the theme Les villes pour le climat. All the medias present at this working session were of the same opinion that development should not undertake at the cost of destroying or further polluting the environment. It was a platform whereby all representatives from different cities around the world shared of the consequences that their countries are facing because of changes in climate conditions and the need to take urgent actions. Disasters are becoming more and more violent. Our island is also vulnerable to disasters such as flood, tsunami, landslide, and torrential rainfall. In order to be prepared against such calamities, it has become important today to devise preventive measures, well set up planning and response procedures before and after the disaster in order to reduce risks associated with it. I'm sure that this platform will enable all of us present with the expert assistance of Mr. Paul Hayden to be prepared and equipped while operating the level. With these few words, I would like to thank once again all of you and the National Disaster Risk Management Center for organizing this capacity building at the City Council. I therefore declare the workshop open. Thank you for your attention.
Important building here in Port Louis. I noticed, sir, as we were waiting for your arrival, these are leading sheds over there. I noticed waiting for your arrival, the architect had perfectly lined up the doors with the street and it adds to the importance of the building. What I want to do today in this session is to introduce you to the project, to talk to you a little about a draft framework that we produced for response and recovery in Mauritius. And as the bearers pointed out, one of the key building blocks of resilience is all of you in this room. Because however hard people work at the national centre, resilience will only be achieved at a local level and with local communities, and using your local knowledge, you're able to contribute to the overall resolution of the emergency. I'm then going to move on to some really simple tools that will help you, some principles for emergency management, which I hope will make your job much easier. The main thing in my project is to recognise that you are all very busy professionally. Disasters is not your main job. Hopefully, and I'll touch wood for good luck, but hopefully you will not face a disaster and you will not need to put this training into practice. What's important to me is that if once in your entire career you are called upon to act as an emergency responder, you understand your role, your responsibility, and that expectations of you are realistic. And it was supporting on structures and training to enable you to do that easily. We're going to move into a little exercise. This is not a full training simulation today. The exercise is really designed for you to have a discussion amongst yourselves, supported by the kind of professional officers, the police officers, the fire officers, that would also be advising you should this be a real event. So I'll explain that when we come to it. We'll do a little debrief of that exercise and there'll be an opportunity for some questions and discussion at the end. I actually wonder whether I'll do better shouting. Can you hear me without the microphone? It's going up and down a little. The Director General's already mentioned the main outputs from the project. If I talk a little about worst credible disaster scenarios, we're not talking about Hollywood movie scripts. We're talking about designing for Mauritius what would be a reasonable, foreseeable emergency against which we can then measure the fire service response, the police response, the council's response, the international response, so that we have a uniform assessment across all agencies of what we would do, how would we cope. And from that, we've been able to do an assessment of future development needs, including gaps. Just as importantly, right towards the end of this project, and the project concludes on the island, it concludes for me on Thursday, is a comprehensive action plan. I can share with you already, although the work is not yet complete, one of my main conclusions is a requirement for investment and training for you. Because the importance of the local emergency operations command and the importance of the local structure cannot be overemphasised. And from where we are today, I recognise that there's a great need for training and support for you, which I cannot deliver all of in 2 hours. But we can put this as a key recommendation going forward. As I say, we're looking at worst credible case, not the worst possible case. We've got 3 scenarios that we've identified, each of which test many different strands of emergency response. So when we've looked at cyclone, we've looked at cyclone impacts, which also include obviously wind and wind damage, but also torrential rain, flooding, a surge in coastal areas. We've looked at a port incident, because actually for Mauritius, although many of your emergency plans are based on natural disaster, and natural disaster remains the most likely challenge, especially with climate change impacts on a coastal island like this. But there are other disasters which may test your abilities, test the capacities of your emergency responders even more significantly, and they include an incident at the port. Obviously, with only one major port on the island, it's not only the scale of the disaster which poses a challenge, but actually we start to test if there was a major fire and explosion at the port. Does this quickly result in pollution at sea, which will have an impact on tourism? Will it start to impact very quickly textile workers? Because if exports just in time these days are not met because the port is closed, that has an impact on jobs. So my point is, an event here at the port isn't a problem only for that district or for Port Louis, it's an island-wide emergency. And also it's a severe challenge for us in terms of the emergency response. When we look at air transport, now that Emirates Airlines operate the Airbus A380, a very large aeroplane, it flies over the island. If we have to contemplate the worst credible, not very likely, but worst credible disaster, would be an A380 crashing, not at the airport, but in an urban area. And from my time in Port Louis, in Mauritius rather, we've looked at where would be the most inconvenient place for that disaster to occur, and probably in the Vapor Phoenix area. The traffic is bad there anyway, but with a disaster of that nature, it actually closes many of the transport links. How would our ambulances and SAMU cope? How do we bring in international aid from Reunion or from the EU or from other places? Indian military have field hospitals. If we needed those quickly, what procedures are in place, what policies need to be in place for the government and for the national centre to make the request to bring in the aid and to put it into effective use. So these are some of the scenarios we've been looking at.
Monsieur le maire, aujourd'hui, nous avons le travail, le crisis management, plan catastrophe, tout a été catastrophe. Donc, pour comment dire, sa simulation, le pour là, qui est le plus intéressant pour nous.
Définitivement. Oui, bonjour. Définitivement, nous apprenons l'exercice de simulation, mais aujourd'hui, nous apprenons beaucoup à travers le port. Peut-être, il y a beaucoup de gens qui ont réfléchi avant, si demain, il y a un petit fait dans le port, ou nous avons un crash d'avion, peut-être même quelque chose comme ça que nous n'avons pas pensé avant. Mais on connaît une simulation au niveau du port et au niveau de l'aéroport, mais si ça arrive en plein centre de la capitale, mais qui nous fait? Alors définitivement, c'est une bonne initiative que le gouvernement il prend, moi-même un expert pareil, pour nous enrichir nos connaissances. Bien sûr, là, nous travaillons en collaboration de tous les stakeholders, c'est-à-dire la police, fire services, la santé, et surtout au niveau sécurité sociale. après les événements, comment nous faire pour qu'il y ait pour 50 personnes.
Justement, tu vois qu'il y a beaucoup de policiers dans sa présentation de cet expert-là. Au niveau de la décision, c'est-à-dire, on va prendre une décision, on va prendre une certaine quantité. Pour tout ça, valorisant, tout ça, lié au quai,
Non, définitivement. Parce que ça, ok, nous disons le layout, il peut chair par le maire ou bien un chairperson ou un district council. Mais bien sûr, nous avons toute l'expertise, comment le consultant fait ressortir. Alors, nous sommes capables de travailler avec nous, l'expérience qu'il nous a, en collaboration et avec le commandant de police, SMF et même pourquoi pas au niveau de la santé.
Justement, et ça expérience, dire que ça arrive seulement au niveau du recovery. Là, c'est là que la municipalité vraiment pour rentrer avec ce ban à audier, ce ban bulldozer, c'est pas qu'ils affaires. Ça aussi, vous apparez où l'équipe pour ça.
C'est ça, nous l'équipe est toujours prêt, nous l'équipement est update et aussi au niveau de la municipalité de Poli, je connais, je peux pas tous faire ça. Nous pouvons revoir surtout le capital investment en termes d'équipement moderne, qui est accessible plus facile et bien sûr en cas d'une calamité, surtout post-calamité, nous connaissons, nous avons retour back to square one, nous day-to-day activité normale.
Donc, quand la municipalité peut préparer un peu la saison des pluies, là, tout va drainer, déboucher, parce qu'on en voit toujours sec, mais...
Définitivement. Ça, depuis que je suis là, au mois d'août, je finis une grande réunion de travail avec tout le head of department, tous les conseillers, nous sommes ensemble, nous mettons la tête ensemble, qui va drainer. Côté situation plus catastrophique, nous faisons nettoyer, par exemple, rivière la Tanier pour lui, nous faisons nettoyer et aussi nous faisons là nous demandons une grande collaboration avec les habitants. Arrêtez de faire des ordures, arrêtez de faire des vieux matelas, vieux morts. Nous faisons une campagne, des vieux ordinateurs, nous ramassons des IBX, nous traversons, nous ramassons. Rendre un service, pas obstruer ce bandre-là, parce que c'est nous-mêmes qui pourrons nous-mêmes dire.
The main thing that we're talking about today for all of the representatives from local councils is how they can better improve safety for people at that local level. The local councillors, the local police officers, the local fire brigade officers, local ambulance officers, they know their area very well and they're better able to work together to take the national plans and apply them at that local level. They also know the community and the community groups. They know which groups are the most vulnerable and they know who needs to be rescued and assisted more quickly. So our workshop today is helping the planning process to bring together all of the important mayors and chief executives and the chairman, along with the local commanders from the various services, and have them work together to put in place emergency plans to deal with any calamity.
So, Mauritius is very used to cyclones. We had a very big flooding. You've talked about the port and air crash. Is Mauritius to your knowledge?
What we're also looking at is a range of disasters that go beyond those which Mauritius is more used to, like a cyclone. So Mauritius has experienced many cyclones in the past and it's become very practiced and very used to dealing with those. But there are other calamities that could also happen. They are not so likely to happen, but should they occur, there will be a severe test. So examples would be a major industrial accident or a maritime accident, for example at the port in Port Louis. Other examples could include a major transport accident. It could be a bus crash, it could be an aircraft that crashes off the airport. So again, we need to test the plans for these calamities in addition to the more usual natural hazards like flooding, cyclone, landslide. We need to be ready for anything that could happen in Mauritius. And by this planning process that we're looking at today, we can make sure that at a local level, whatever the calamity, all of the local responders, along with the local councillors, are better able to deal with the problem.
What about you say a ship accident outside our reefs but within our waters?
Yes.
Does that include the national, the local, or
yes,
everything?
Even for maritime incidents, which may occur off the shores of Mauritius, could have a significant impact for councils on Mauritius. So, for example, if there was a collision with a ship or a significant fire on board a ship that was just outside the port, Should that come ashore somewhere, it could result in pollution, and of course pollution event not only would damage the environment, which we need to avoid, but it could have a direct impact on things like tourism, business, on fishing, all of the resources we need to keep Mauritius safe and prosperous. So it's important that we're ready to mitigate any disaster on land or at sea which will impact the communities of Mauritius.